CEO podcast. My name is Dr. Cindy. I'm a naturopathic doctor, a single mother of two beautiful girls, a retreat host, and I am super passionate about supporting families as they bring new life into this reality. I want to ensure that we are imprinting love, safety, and trust onto the next generation because I know that the ripple effects of that are far greater than we can even understand. So let's get rid of the fear, the anxiety, and the uncertainty that goes along with the birth process, and let's enter a new phase of reality. On today's episode of the podcast, we have my dear friends, Tim and Melissa Horlick. Me and Melissa were meant to be friends, even though it seems that we have fought it. We went to the same high school and didn't cross paths. We went to the same university and didn't cross paths. I moved to a town about 45 minutes away from where we both grew up, and it wasn't until I was about to move from the first house that I owned with my partner that I realized Tim and Melissa had moved directly behind us. And as we were installing the fence, we got to know each other. And I'm so thankful for that because even though I moved, our friendship has blossomed and they're such a source of support for me. And I really hope that I am a source of support for them. They've been there for me through thick and thin. Our daughters are friends, and it's just been such a beautiful friendship to experience. This is a couple that really portrays the power of coming together, of cooperating, of empowering themselves so that they can have the birth experience that they desire. If you guys are interested, you can head over to the show notes or my Instagram at Dr. Cindy Tahan because I've created a free guide to my top 10 homeopathic remedies to use during labor, delivery, and the postpartum period. I know I used them, and I know Tim and Melissa had them on hand in case they needed to use them. This is definitely a modality that is underused in the birth world, and it can actually have great impacts on your experience. So let's get to know Tim and Melissa a little bit more. Melissa is a creative director at dancebug.com and studied multimedia and communication at McMaster University and went on to get a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in Image Arts, New Media from Ryerson University. Fun fact, she's also a certified wedding coordinator and homestager. Melissa also has a way with the camera. She has been a photographer for 15 years, and when she isn't taking photos, she spends time designing graphics. Her interests don't stop there. She loves home decor and using power tools. When you can get a glimpse into her home DIY projects and get some inspo of your own by following her Instagram account at McFadden Living. Melissa is truly one of the most creative people I have ever met. I love going to her house because almost every time I go there, she's changed something or created something, and her home is just so cozy and I love it so much. Tim is a former bike mechanic, having serviced bicycles for over 10 years. He is a whiskey enthusiast at heart and has recently started up his own business, The Whiskey Boss, providing private, in-home, and special event whiskey tastings. Love whiskey and want to know more about it? Tim is definitely your guy. All right, so now you know a little bit about them. You know that they had a VBAC, a vaginal birth after cesarean. So let's dive in and hear their story. Please remember that although I am a naturopathic doctor, I am not your naturopathic doctor. This information is made available to you for educational and informational purposes only and should never be used as a substitute for medical advice. Hello, Tim and Melissa and Ivy. So this is take two because as soon as we started recording initially, Ivy just had so much to say about her birth experience. So now she's joining us and she's actually in the frame so we can see her if you guys are actually tuning in on video. We have adorable Miss Ivy who has really inspired this podcast, really. So Tim and Melissa have two beautiful daughters, Emily and Ivy, and we're going to hear both of their birth stories today and just the difference in experience and just from the initial conception, the pregnancy, to the postpartum period, and all of what that entails. And so we'll start with Emily's experience.
Sure. Do you want to start from the very beginning, like before I was even pregnant at all?
Yeah, maybe we can talk about just the mindset going in and that aspect. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like terrified to get pregnant because everyone you talk to, firstly, everyone tells you like terrible stories about their birth. And so it leaves you like afraid of that experience. And also, like my mom was so sick and my sister was sick, and I had cousins and things who had been really sick or had like itchy all over and all these things that they had. And so going into the whole thing, like we took a long time to decide to actually like have kids. I'm like, can we do this now? Are we ready now? Because I was like so actually afraid of the whole thing and how I would personally react to it. But eventually we got to the point where it was like, it's like now or never, you know, like we're like 34 and 35 and if we don't have kids now, like when are we going to have them? You know what I mean? So so that was the but we just like dove in. And I will say now, and I tell everyone I know who is like, oh yeah, we want to have kids one day, like who are a little bit younger or whatever. I'm like, listen, there will never be a time when you feel like I am so perfectly ready right now in this moment. Like I've got everything in line, like my finances are perfect, my everything is perfect. Like nothing will ever be perfect. Like if it's something that you want, like you just gotta like throw yourself in. This is one of these things, like you gotta throw yourself in the deep end or it's like never gonna happen. Because I waited for a day where I felt like, yeah, I definitely feel like I'm not scared of this. Like then we would have no children, but we have two and I'm really thankful for that. So that's the after getting pregnant, man, I was like so happy. I'm like one of these pregnant people that people want to punch in the face because I have like no symptoms at all of basically being pregnant. So it's really pregnancy is very kind to me. So I can't complain about that. So that was wonderful. But I won't say that I wasn't still afraid of like the giving birth part, because even though being pregnant was fine and easy, I was afraid of the end. But then you had your daughter like 8 months before us, so it was a few months into me being pregnant, and you had this like what seemed to me like this amazing birth story. And I don't know how familiar people are on your podcast. Are you mad? That's Ivy being mad with your story, but it was just like you had her at home and like with a midwife, and you spoke so positively about it, and the whole sort of laboring time was so short. I thought, oh my gosh, you're like my birth idol and I want my birth to be exactly like yours. So I was like, what did you do? And you sort of told me about this thing that you'd practice called hypnobirthing, and so we went out and we like actually did a course, like an in-person course on hypnobirthing, and we'd done all this sort of stuff. And I'll say that we kind of practiced. Like, yeah, I think that we could have practiced more.
Yeah, but it was a lot of help. Like we definitely got a lot out of hypnobirthing for sure.
Yeah, we learned a lot, but I don't know that we put our 100% all into it. And whether that matters for our end result or not, I don't really know. But we definitely did, and I think it definitely helped me go into the whole thing, like the birth of Emily, not being like afraid. Like I went in definitely feeling like I could do it, which was great. But in terms of, are you mad? Ivy is so mad. But in terms of like the actual birth, they sort of tell you all these things to be ready for, but they didn't ever sort of go into like, oh, okay, your water breaks. And they tell you, okay, if your water breaks, that's rare that your water breaks in this movie style fashion. And then you're supposed to labor at home. And I'm like, okay, but my labor didn't start. And I just like waited around for like a whole day until my cousin, who's like a labor and delivery nurse, she gets a little antsy on me, and she tells me she wants me to go to the hospital because it's been quite a while since my water is broken, and I guess they get concerned about we'll wait for her to stop. They get concerned with your risk of infection increasing and all of these sort of problems, I guess, that can come up if your water has been broken for a long time. And so I ended up going. And I told them I didn't want any interventions. I didn't want to be induced. I didn't want anything. And so from probably about 4 o'clock in the afternoon to about 9 o'clock, they kind of let me be. And then, so that's like what, like 4 or 5 hours or something that they let me be alone. Then they're like, well, nothing's really happening. Can we start you on Pitocin? And I was like, at this point, I was like, sure, it's been a whole day, nothing's happened. And so they started me on Pitocin, and man, labor on Pitocin is like intense. So I was on Pitocin for about 16 hours. And then at which point they were like, well, do you want to try an epidural? Maybe that would relax you, and then maybe things will progress. But because things had really not progressed too much, they just sort of kept turning it up and turning it up. And it was like very intense. Like I will like, I'll say like my labor didn't start naturally. Like I was in labor and it was like crazy. But so I was like, fine, we'll do the epidural. I was like really tired after that whole experience. And then I did sleep, and that was nice to do. But when I woke up, I really hadn't progressed that much further. So I continued on Pitocin for sort of the rest of the evening until we got to about 11 o'clock at night. And they were like, so you kind of have an elevated temperature. So we think you might be getting, maybe an infection or a fever or whatever. So do you want to do a C-section? And I was, at this point, I'm like really not wanting to do that, but I also haven't dilated past like 4 centimeters. So just kind of like, it's been 2 days and nothing's happened. So we decided to go ahead with it. Now, whether or not that was always in the cards for me, if I had played my cards differently from the start, I don't know, but that's sort of the birth story of my daughter. I will say, afterwards I was like really beaten down by the experience. Tim ended up having to sort of hold her afterwards because they like put her on me, and I just wanted to hand her right back. Like I just could not have her on me. I was just so exhausted by the whole thing, and I felt so guilty. And I feel like to this day I carry that guilt with me a little bit, that I couldn't like hold her in those first moments, but I feel happy that he was able to. But it's definitely something still that I'm like, man, I need to get over this, but it sticks with you. So yeah.
Yeah, it's important to process the birth story, like no matter what unfolds, like even if everything goes your way, there are still things that need to be processed. And it's such a physical, somatic experience that we hold it in our tissues if we're not, using different resources or support systems to process those things. So this could be an outlet for you. And I know that we've had some conversations, so it's always nice to even like say your birth story, right? Because all the different emotions, as like you're even saying this, right? Like you realize the emotions are still in there somewhere. That guilt is still in there somewhere. So it's nice to even vocalize what your experience was.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But you go in with this big list of things that you want, right? Like I went in and I was like, I'm going to have an unmedicated birth. It's going to be so fast. I don't want an induction. I don't want an epidural. I don't want any of these things. And it was like, everything was the opposite with her birth. So you just leave feeling like, was this whole thing a joke? Like, is someone just playing a trick on me that this is the way that it went, when I went in with all these ideals and I feel like I practiced all this stuff. But you know what? Her umbilical cord was wrapped around her neck 3 times. Maybe we like to say she was a little tied up. So, and maybe inevitably she was never coming the way that we planned. So, it's the saying, you want to make God laugh or something, tell him your plans.
Totally. Yeah, I think so. And you never know, like, was it necessary? Was it not necessary? Did one intervention lead to the other? Like we never really fully know. And like you had this beautiful, very simple, easy pregnancy, right? And I always think of birth as an initiation into parenting. And parenting, as you both know, is not simple. It's not easy. And so on some level, maybe you needed that experience, because we don't get the birth we want. We get the birth that we need, right? Maybe you needed that experience to get you ready for motherhood and fatherhood, right? Yeah.
It certainly threw me into it all in bad shape. Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember you mentioning that you had that shaking response from the anesthesia, which is
Yeah,
quite common.
it's really interesting. Like, I feel like one of the best things you can do going into like your sort of birth and postpartum experience is like reading and watching videos and like gaining as much knowledge as possible. Because going into that experience and having this like shaking, like I was shaking from basically, I don't even know. I felt like it was like the whole time. And I even shook like after she was born. I was shaking for like the whole entire next day. And it's not
Mm,
anything, and the nurses don't seem to care, but it's not
mm,
anything that you think like you're concerned about it, but it's
mhm,
like totally normal. And since I've seen like TikTok videos where people talk about, it's like, why don't they prepare you for these things that could happen so that when you do find yourself like completely having the jitters, that you're like, okay, wait, like I'm okay and I'm safe and this
mhm,
is fine. And this is just my body's like reaction to like what's going on in me right now, and that it's actually like not a problem.
Mhm.
mhm.
That would have been nice to know going in. But yes, I definitely had the serious shakes the first time.
Yeah. And you guys were prepared. Like you guys did a prenatal course. You
Oh, we
guys,
did like the course through the town.
Yeah.
We did a hypnobirthing course. And so I want to preface like everything I say in this is not like if you do all the things I do the second time or the changes that I made, because I was determined with this one's birth, Ivy, that I was going to try to do like everything different because I wanted a different outcome. But
mm,
I have friends who did a lot of similar things to me with the birth of their child, and they ended up having a C-section as well. So
mm,
it's not to say that if you do all of these things, like I don't want to say like if you do XYZ, you won't end up in this situation. It's completely untrue. Like every situation is really unique. So,
mhm.
but
Yeah.
I hope that the things that I did helped me the second time around.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's important to know like every mother's body, every birthing person's body is different. Like every baby is different, every circumstance is different. And so I don't think there's any formula that's like, if you do this, for sure, you will experience this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I have a different mindset on this. Like you can do everything like Melissa did for Ivy going forward, but there's no guarantee. She's giving Ivy the best opportunity, and it's everything we do becomes her birth story. We're just a part of it. And so she can take that in any direction. And so I feel like it might not ever work out, but if you do these things, it increases the chances of your baby taking the better route than,
Mm-hmm.
interventions.
Mm-hmm.
That makes
Yeah.
sense.
I always like to say it's like your baby's birthday. They're going to come out however they want to, whenever they want
Mhm.
to, wherever they want to. Like the birthing person, the mother is just the vessel.
Yeah.
And it's a dance between mom and baby, really.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Definitely.
So it's a lot about letting go of control. It's a lot about surrender.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that because I went to your baby moon retreat and that's one of the things that you talked about a lot. And I don't like to consider myself, but I do consider myself a little bit of a control freak. Like I love to have control over like everything that I do in my life. Like I do not like the feeling of being out of control. And so you talked a lot, and everyone was talking a lot about this like idea of surrender and this like giving up of control and just like letting go. And that was something that I really like had to keep in mind and really had to work on, like this idea that I couldn't control everything, that
Mhm.
whatever was going to happen was going to happen, and I can do my best, but like to try to put things into play in the best possible way that I can, but that things are going to unfold the way that they unfold. And also like trust and like having
Mhm.
that like deep belief in yourself. It's weird because with my birth with Emily, like I labored on Pitocin for like 16 hours. The nurses were like, I've never seen anyone actually do this, like 16 hours on Pitocin without an epidural. They're like, this is insane.
That is
And
insane.
so I feel like I went into that birth like believing, like, because I had talked to you and because of all this stuff I fed to myself, I like believed that I could do this and I didn't have to like have an epidural and I didn't have to have all these interventions that I didn't want, because I so firmly believed. And yet it was so weird going into my birth with Ivy. It's like it crushed my belief and my trust, like in like my body and my baby. And it took really surrounding myself with like people like you, people like the doula that we ended up hiring, people around me who are at the gym I ended up going to. Like, people were constantly feeding me that like you can do this sort of mindset. And I think that was like really important for me to like continually have that sort of input. But yeah, I don't know.
Today's episode is brought to you by a game changer in my daily routine, mud water. Now, if you're tired of the coffee crashes and jitters like I have been, and you want something that not only tastes amazing, but also provides clean, sustainable energy, you have got to try this stuff. Picture this: a cup of mud water in hand, the perfect blend of functional mushrooms without any of those unnecessary sweeteners. And let's not forget the antioxidant power of turmeric, the anti-inflammatory benefits, and the mouth-watering flavor profile of masala chai, turmeric, cinnamon, and cacao. Trust me, you will love this flavor. I'm a working mom, and mud water has become my secret weapon. 1 cup in the morning, sometimes another in the afternoon, and suddenly I'm not just getting through my day, I'm thriving. The sustainable energy and focus have made me more productive, less irritable, and an all-around better version of myself. And here's the best part. Head over to mudwater.com/birthceo. That's mudwtr.com/birthceo. And when you're checking out, enter the promo code BIRTHCEO to snag an exclusive 25% off. Yep, that's right, 25% off your mud water order. So if you're ready to upgrade your daily ritual, say goodbye to the coffee crashes, and hello to sustained energy and focus, check out mud water. Your taste buds and productivity will thank you.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I wonder, so with the first experience that you had with Emily's birth, it maybe that piece of surrender and letting go was the lesson.
Maybe.
And you had to kind of like reestablish this trust and this deep knowing in your body before delivering Ivy. And then you now had that piece of deep trust and surrender and letting go. It
Yeah,
could have been. There's so many
maybe.
factors, right?
It's true.
But it could have been the lesson, because like when I say we get the birth that we need, not the one that we want, it's so multi-level. Like it's on a spiritual level, a physical level, a mental, emotional level. And yeah, I feel like you just had to constantly just get those resources and people in your life to reestablish this trust and this deep knowing that you can do this and your body was meant to it. And even more so because once you've had a cesarean birth, it's like, do I just do it again? Which is what most people do. Like the rates have for a vaginal birth after cesarean have gone down over time. And so a lot of people are opting just for another cesarean after they've had one or two.
Well, it's the first thing they offer you. Like so I've tried to have a midwife with both of my babies, and I guess they're very busy over here in Ontario. So I've not been accepted with a midwife either time that I've been pregnant. So both times I went with an OB, and no hate on OBs, but they definitely come from, I think, a different sort of mindset and perspective on the whole thing. And it's the first thing they offer you. You go in for your first thing, and they're like, okay, so you had a C-section last time, so you're going to do a C-section again? And I had to be like, no, I don't think so. And the weirdest thing is, after you say that, well, then they pull out this sheet of paper and they start giving you all these stats. And the stats they give you are in your favor for a VBAC. Like they're like, 75% or something, or 60 to 80% are successful. And you're like, wait, why is that the first thing you offer me is a C-section when my odds of success just Like,
Or over
why am I
50%. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, why? I don't understand. But yeah, it's wild. And everyone, I personally don't even know that anyone else like that I know personally has tried for it. Like any person I know who's had a C-section before, they've all opted to have
Or
it.
scheduled
Yeah, to
C-section.
schedule it. And I think it just comes with a little bit of the fear of it happening again. Like that was hard to get around. Like the idea that I'm going to go through this whole, like, because you hear that if you schedule your C-section, it's a lot easier in terms of recovery.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure that that's true. Like not to labor for a whole day and go into like major surgery. I'm sure it's easier. And so you sort of look at this path that you can take and it's like, okay, do I make this choice to go down this laboring path again, where I may just end up in the same situation where it's just so difficult? Or do I sort of choose the path where, you know, it's a little bit like your redemption, you know, like I feel like my birth with Emily was a little bit like kind of taken away from me. And I kind of wanted to reclaim that and try to experience something different, you know, like I just felt like deep down, like I knew that I could do it. And that had been taken away from me. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to at least try again. Like the odds are in my favor, but I do think it's wild that that's the first thing they offer you. I'm like, why? It's so insane.
Yeah, it is funny. Like when you look at the stats alone, it's like you have more than a 50% chance of success. But
way more. Yeah.
the first thing I'm going to offer you is to do the exact same thing that you did last time.
Yeah.
So it is really interesting. But I think the main concerns from the world of obstetrics, it's been a long day. Obstetrics. There you go.
Yeah.
is that you might have a uterine rupture or hemorrhage.
Yeah.
And so if I have a patient and I know that that's a potential and they could either labor and then end up with another cesarean, or I can just offer them a cesarean right away, then, I might be a little bit biased and go for that. The rates are quite low for a uterine rupture and hemorrhage.
Very low.
Yeah. And, as we've continually said, the rates for success for a VBAC are not low.
No, they're very high. And so I'm like,
Yeah.
you're asking me to have the surgery because my possibility of uterine rupture is like 0.1% or something. Like it's so low. And I understand that they want to monitor you for it, which is a reason why, with my second birth, everything in me wanted to like have a home birth because, you're my birth idol, right? And I wanted to like have the water birth in the tub in my house, like so comfortable. Like I did not want to go into the hospital, but there's also a part of me that knows like, okay, yeah, I did have a C-section last time. So I do have that sort of history, whether I don't really know whether it was something physiological with me that actually caused it. But I had no reason to sort of believe one way or the other. But I do know from a little bit of a safety net perspective, had there been uterine rupture or anything like that, like at least I knew that I was close by to that care. Like I live 40 minutes either way from both the hospitals. I always feel like if I lived like, 5-10 minutes away or something, that I might try for the home thing. But I was a little too scared in the second instance to do that. But
yeah.
Yeah.
And the most important thing is that you're comfortable. So if you were laboring at home and in the back of your mind, you were thinking like, okay, I'm 40 minutes away from the hospital. Like what if something goes wrong? Then that could have negatively impacted the progression of your labor, right? So I think you just chose to be in a space where you felt like if something went wrong, at least I'm, where I need to be. And that probably served you well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you want me to dive into her birth story or not, but I can off of what we just talked about.
Let's go for it. And then I want you to compare the postpartum period as well.
Sure. Yeah. So with Ivy, my biggest fear going in, it's a ridiculous fear. My biggest fear going into my birth with Ivy was that my water was going to break. I'd have these meetings with my doula and she's like, what's your fear? Let's do a fear release, all these things. And it was that my water was going to break prematurely like it did last time because it puts me on this sort of arbitrary clock. I'd done a lot of reading and I'd watched a lot of videos. The hypnobirthing class I'd taken with Emily really encouraged us to watch videos of people giving birth. And it was something that I didn't do when I was pregnant with Emily. But this time I probably watched hundreds of videos. Like I followed Instagram accounts. I just did all of these things. Because I think it's important to know what's normal, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're in this whole experience and something's going on and you haven't seen like someone else experience something, then it's hard for you to know like what's normal or to feel like safe, or you know what's going on. So I watched so many videos going into that. Um and I learned that, you know, I sort of set boundaries for myself. I said, okay, listen, if my water breaks this time, it's fine. I want to push it longer, you know, like I'd sort of read and I'd seen like, okay, that I could probably go to 48 hours. I also knew that I had been like, Emily wasn't born until 48 hours after. And so I thought I'll give myself a longer window to go into labor, because I felt like, you know what, like my body wasn't ready last time. Like my water broke, but my body wasn't, like I wasn't having contractions because it probably wasn't ready yet. And I thought it was important for my body to be ready. But luckily that didn't happen this time, which was great. So I sort of woke up the day after I was due, and I started having these little sort of things that I thought were contractions, which I didn't know because I'd never gone into labor on my own before. But I was kind of having these feelings, and I told Tim, I said, "Oh, Tim, you know, maybe I'm in labor today. I don't know." So we went out, took our daughter trick-or-treating. We're like wandering around the town. I'm like pausing every once in a while for these like little contractions that I'm having. And it wasn't probably, that was like 6 a.m. that started. And it wasn't probably until nighttime where things really started to pick up a little bit more. And they wanted you to go into the hospital right away. Like if you've had a C-section before, they want you, like as soon as you think you're in labor, they want you to go to the hospital because they want to continuously monitor you the whole time. But I really, really wanted to labor at home. And honestly, the whole time I didn't know if I was in actual labor or if it was like false labor or if this was early labor, whatever. So I'm going through this whole thing, not knowing if I'm in labor. And I'll say that up until the point that we actually decided to go to the hospital, which is about 2:00 the next day, I really didn't know if I was in labor or not. It was so weird because they say like, oh, you know, you're going to get into this pattern, you know, it's going to be every 5 minutes and the contractions are going to be a minute long. And then there's going to be another 5-minute break. And that's when you should go to the hospital. And I will say like my contractions were nowhere near normal. They were rolling into each other. Then they'd pause for 20 minutes. And then I'd have like, you know, a 3-minute contraction and then 5-minute break. It was all over the place. I was like, I don't know what's going on. So Tim was trying to track these wild things. And we ended up calling the hospital because I got to the point where I was like, you know what? If I'm actually in labor right now, this is going to be really hard. If this gets any more like closer together and I have to drive to the hospital and because I won't have the option to like move around and change position in the car, that we should probably go. So we called them and they said, oh yeah, since you have a C-section, definitely come in and we'll check you out and see how things are going. And I got to the hospital and they checked me and I was already at 7 centimeters. And I was like, yes, I'm like slaying last time. So I found out I was actually in labor, like well into it. And I guess it was just a very big difference having like been on Pitocin and the intensity of that from my last experience to now sort of this gradual sort of ease into it, to the moment I was at the hospital, I was questioning if I was actually in labor or not, which is, I won't say that it wasn't intense what I was going through. It definitely was. Tim can like vouch for the intensity of it, but I was like, I don't know, is this labor? Maybe I'm crazy.
Yeah. She's absolutely in labor and she just didn't want to believe it.
I was in labor denial.
Yeah. Well, the Pitocin contractions are so intense.
They're so intense.
Yeah. And so
like,
if you have that as your only experience for what potentially labor could be. So you were like, I don't know. Am I in labor? Am I not?
Is this labor? It wasn't regular. It was like, it was all over the place. But I was very much in labor. So they obviously admitted me. Which was great. I did a lot before she was born, which I didn't really get into, but I'd mentioned earlier that I wanted to have a completely different experience. So I tried to do all these different things. So I'd regularly gone to the gym. I was going to F45 and doing like HIIT training all the way up until I was 38 weeks pregnant, which was crazy. But the gym was like so supportive of me, which was so great. Like they were always telling me like, you're going to push this baby out so fast. And every day they were checking in, like, how come you're still here? Like, so it was really cool to have that experience because I didn't exercise at all yeah, to have that community. Because I didn't exercise at all with Emily. I was in this boat where you read online, like, oh, like you should rest and don't lift anything that's over, 10 pounds or whatever. Like it was all this sort of stuff that you read, like, don't do anything. And this time I was like, oh my gosh, I was like deadlifting, like, 60, 70, 80 pounds, whatever it was. I was like
Nice.
doing all these crazy things. And we hired a doula. My sister had told me, like, a doula is a waste of time. Don't get a doula. I guess she had a doula she didn't like or didn't feel as she was useful for her. But I will say, like, having a doula just through that whole experience, I don't think like like pregnancy, like while I was pregnant, I don't know that it was super helpful to me. I mean, we had a couple of meetings and that was nice, but like in our doula in action, like while we were in the hospital, was like incredible. She knew all the right places to like apply pressure when you were having contractions. She had suggestions on like positions we could try to help like move things along, to try to get the baby into sort of the best position and everything. So I would say like a doula night and day is just also great to have someone. Really. Yeah, it's great to have someone there who knows what you want, who is really helping you to get to what you want, and also who just has been around a lot of births, so knows, like, on top of what you've already sort of learned yourself, she knows what to expect. She's been through this. She's been doing it for 20 years. Like, she knows what this process looks like in all different ways. And so just having that around you. And the nice thing was she was trained in hypnobirthing because she had done a whole bunch of births where people had done it and she thought it was interesting. And so she was like actually trained in clinical hypnosis for the purpose of birth. And so the whole time I downloaded an app that I'd used for this whole pregnancy from day one. It was called the Gentle Birth app. And every night before I would go to bed, I'd listen to these sort of meditations or affirmations or like hypnobirthing sessions, whatever would come up for the day, because I told them that I wanted to have a VBAC. And so they put me on this VBAC journey. But she was like saying all the things that my app would say to me. She was telling me that I was strong. She was telling me that everything was going exactly the way that it was supposed to, that, that I was safe, which was great to have that in your ear, like the entire time. She was great. I went to a chiropractor for the very first time when I was pregnant because I had been watching some videos on Instagram from the Grow Co, and the lady who runs it is a chiropractor, and she was talking about all the benefits of chiropractic in pregnancy and how it can help the baby get into a good position. It can sort of help with your like alignment of your pelvis and everything. And I thought, I've never tried chiropractic before at all. And she was wonderful. I'm actually starting a fitness class with her in a couple of weeks. So that's kind of cool. But I just feel like I did all of these things differently from last time. I went and got acupuncture in the weeks leading up to my birth. I've never done that before, but I tried, and who knows, maybe it worked. Like with Emily, I went a week over, and with Ivy, she came the day after my due date. So maybe all the acupuncture worked. I don't know what worked or what didn't work. But anyways, I got to the hospital. I will say it slowed things down a little bit, getting to the hospital, which they always say, because you're sort of out of that like sort of safe environment of your home. But sort of hours passed, I progressed to about 8 centimeters. And then they sort of started suggesting, like, you're really close. Like, what if we break your water? Because of course my water didn't break early. My water didn't break at all. That was the opposite, which was amazing. And I thought, you know what? Like, I'm right here. I'm right at the end. Like, why not? Like, I'm not going to be on any clock. Like, the odds of me being in labor for like another 24 hours at this point, in my mind, it was like slim to none. And for me, just thought, you know what? If they need to pop the balloon so she could drop down a little bit more, great, let's do it. So they broke my water, and within a couple of hours, like, she was born, which was great. And I pushed for only 8 minutes, which was so wonderful. I remember I was at the pushing sort of phase, and I said to everyone in the room, I was like, is this even doing anything? And they were like, oh yeah, like we could see her right here. And I was like, great. And I was like, this is go time. And like this, the feeling of like when your baby is like coming is so intense. It's like this deep, inner, forceful, powerful, like experience. And it's so funny. People are afraid of like the pain of actually like giving birth. And I'll say like, yeah, contractions are very uncomfortable. Okay. They just are. But like the actual giving birth part, like it was fine. It was like the most relieving, like amazing part of the whole thing. But you make crazy noises, or maybe some people are silent, but for me, it was like I made crazy noises. I've never like made like these roaring sounds like this ever in my life. I was like, whatever. But the thing is, I'd watched so many videos, and also having been at your retreat and just like having everyone sort of talking about their experiences. And I remember it was Natalie. We'd been at her New Earth Natalie. We were at her place, and she was talking about having her second child and how her other child comes into the room and is watching. And so she's hesitant. And then her husband had said something to her like, don't worry, like she's seen this before or something, like in another lifetime or something. And then she talks about how she like was a roarer and she like roared her baby out. And so it kind of like knowing and kind of watching all these other sort of people, it's like, okay, it's okay that I'm making these crazy noises. This is what people do, you know?
Mhm.
But had you not watched videos or not surrounded yourself with people and heard their stories and like listened to what this was like for them, I may have felt really self-conscious of that. I may have tried to hold it in, or you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And and I think being able, like, that's a part of like going back to the very beginning of our conversation, that like letting go of control, right? In that moment, like, okay, whatever. This is the sound my body wants to make right now. This is what's gonna happen. And you just gotta like let it go. But
Yeah.
anyways, she was born. Tim actually, I wanted to catch her myself, but I kind of was in an awkward position to be able to catch her. And I just in the moment it was like too intense and I couldn't do it. So like I was like, Tim, you do it. So Tim ended up catching her, and he like actually like he caught her and he like put her on my chest, and I in that moment I was like, oh my God, it's just this rush of like, I did it. Like I did this thing that I knew I could do. Like I did no medications. Like my labor went completely normal. Like I had the most amazing people supporting me. And I just was like, it was just like the moment of elation. You see this picture of me when I had Emily, and this picture of when I had Ivy. And the one I look like I'm like a dead person. And the other one I'm like, so excited. My face was smiling. I look like lit up like a Christmas tree. So what they say about the release of like all of those like feel good hormones, like when you give birth to your
Mhm.
baby, it's true, you know? And it was funny because afterwards she's like, I just want to check and see if you had any tearing or anything like that. And and I was like, oh, I don't think so. Like, it's fine. Like, it doesn't hurt. I feel good. And she was like, well, I'm just going to check. It ends up that I did have a little bit of tearing and she wanted to give me some stitches. But in that moment, like, man, that flood of hormones, you don't feel anything. Like,
Yeah.
and I feel like it lasted for like a whole day. Like, it's just
Mhm.
like you have this like haze of like, it's fine. I'm good.
Totally. Totally. The
Yeah.
adrenaline, the endorphins, the oxytocin, like all of it. You're just that golden hour that everyone talks about.
It's real
Like
life.
it is just priming you to bond with your baby in
Yeah.
this
Mhm.
euphoric state.
Yeah.
And for you, like, to describe it as a moment of elation, like I see satisfaction on both of your faces as you describe that
Yeah.
moment. Like
Oh yeah.
like Tim, dad over there is like, hell yeah, you know, like we did it, because
Yeah.
I know that you guys both prepared so intensely. Like Tim would talk to me about podcasts that he's listening to as the birth partner. Like you guys were truly a team on this
Yeah, he
endeavor.
went into to prep you because you probably have something to say. He came out of our first birth experience telling me that he felt like useless, that he
Yeah.
wasn't helpful. And I said, listen, like you were everything for me. Like you were so helpful and you did all the right things. And if you weren't there, like I don't even know how I could have done it without you. But yeah, going in the second time, like you definitely I was like, well, if you don't want to feel like useless, like prepare yourself, like learn more about the whole thing so you know.
Yeah. And that's a key thing is going into a birth. Research is everything, education. Because with Emily going in, there was so much uncertainty, and you're in this hospital setting, and the doctors are telling you, this is what we think you do. You have no idea. Like, you're in this like crazy, unique, one of a kind, like story. And I felt useless. like I was helping out, but watching Melissa in this discomfort state for so long, I'm like, I don't know how to fix this or help, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just do
Mm-hmm.
what I can.
Mm-hmm.
So with Ivy, the podcast, Sally Ann Biesford, probably didn't say her last name correctly, but it's the Ultimate Birth Partner podcast. She also has a book, The Ultimate Birth Partner, and I highly suggest every birth partner to read the book and listen to her podcast because it's loads of information. She has interviews of various doulas and anyone else related in that field of birth. And so going in, I wanted to make sure Melissa stayed focused in that mindset and the calm relaxation, and wanted to make sure that she was eating and drinking, because with Emily, none of that was happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I
Oh
wasn't
yeah.
even eating.
You
So
gave me water after like every contraction. You handed me my huge water bottle.
yeah,
Nice.
It's like a half gallon. And he was giving it to me like after every single one.
yeah. And so it was just after the research with Ivy, there was a load of things that keep my mind active, making sure she's comfortable, and me as well. Because with Emily, I was like, I didn't care about myself. It was just like focus on Melissa, right? And I don't even know if I ate, right? So
Mm.
this time, I have like electrolytes, protein shake, made sure I was on my A game, and it was such a better overall experience.
But you
And
gave the same to me.
yeah,
Yeah. Like not only was he giving me my water bottle, he was giving we had two water bottles. One was like an electrolyte drink and one was my water bottle. And you were also like just offering me like light, easy food all the time. Like he definitely made sure that I had the energy that I needed. But you also were watching videos with me and like practicing sort of different like areas, like places that you can push, like on your hips, like then not applying like side pressure like up, because it helps like open up your like
yeah,
pelvis and stuff, and just like all these different like sort of positions that we could try. Like you were watching and learning, and so you knew
yeah,
what to
and
suggest in certain
yeah.
moments to help as well.
There's that aspect of learning, but then there's also the communication that we have between both of us to make sure we're on the same page, and also to practice these positions and make sure we're like ready for the actual moment, which was key.
You guys did the work beforehand as a couple, worked on your communication beforehand, did the prep beforehand, so that when you go into labor and delivery, which is like you're in an altered state, Melissa, like as you know,
Yeah. I
right?
needed someone
And
who knew what was going on, who
yeah,
like needed, like he could speak for me, right? He like knew what
mhm.
I wanted. So not only did I have my doula who knew what I wanted, like he also knew what I wanted. And so my hope was always that like when they came in and talked to us, that they would just talk to them because they knew what I wanted, and I didn't have to like engage in this sort of huge conversation with anybody. Because yeah, you're right. You're on another
Yeah,
planet.
Yeah. So you had two advocates essentially to
Yeah.
help protect you in that space so that
Yeah.
you could do what you and your body needed to do and connect with Ivy as she was coming down the birth canal, instead of having to go into your like intellectual mind and make a decision in that
Yeah.
state, right?
Yeah.
Which I
Which
think
was
was so
crucial.
key.
Yeah.
Yeah, so key for you guys.
yeah,
But also what I'm hearing is that you guys, like you had this experience, your initial birth experience, and this time you were like, okay, we know we want to experience something different. And so instead of just crossing our fingers and hoping that something different will happen, you guys took charge and empowered yourselves with the knowledge for sure, but also
Yeah.
the community and the resources that you needed to make that difference. And you treated your body different. You got the self-care that you needed with the acupuncture and the chiropractic, and with your doula and exercising, all things that I'm sure impacted the end result as well.
Oh yeah.
And with your doula, like, of course, Tim is there and you trust him deeply and he's your partner in life and was also your birth partner. But your doula was also this like familiar face that you connected with on a very low stress environment. You know, she came over to your house, I assume, a couple
Oh
of
yeah.
times.
Yep.
Yeah. And so it was someone who knew you, and you weren't just meeting for the first time in this like very altered state where you're, experiencing things that you may or may not have experienced before. Like you didn't know what labor really felt like
Yeah.
before, right?
No, not
Yeah.
one that wasn't augmented.
Right. Yeah. So all of like you guys just took charge. You guys empowered yourselves this time to make a different
Yeah.
outcome. And
And
it
I'm
could
really
have.
trying to tell everyone I know, like, really go out and like read about everything you can. I didn't
Yeah.
realize going into having Emily that it's so common. Like my birth story, it's like almost textbook that you go in, you get induced on Pitocin,
Epidural.
epidural doesn't work. See, it's crazy. And I had no
Mhm.
idea going into this whole thing that was so common, that if you are induced with Pitocin, that it does increase your likelihood of having an epidural because it is so intense. And if you do get your epidural, that it is likely that you'll end up in C-section. It's just all these,
Mhm.
domino effect that had I maybe known up front, maybe I
Yeah.
could have changed my outcome, but maybe not.
Yeah. Yeah. It unfolded as it did, and you guys learned from that experience, which is the most important
Yeah,
thing.
exactly.
And also what I love that you spoke about was knowing that it was okay to vocalize in quote unquote odd and like weird ways, right? Because
Yeah.
it's true. Like we don't like, the medical staff there, you probably met them for the first time that day,
Oh
I
yeah.
assume. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's weird, first of all, and even with yourself in your own home with your family members, to make weird and strange noises that you might have never made before, and like these primal vocalizations that are coming out of your body. And then imagine like meeting a stranger for the first time and making these weird and odd vocalizations for the first
Yeah.
time. So the fact that you were just like, yep, this is what my body wants to do right now, and I'm going to let these noises out of my body. And sure enough, like I just spoke to Trish Brunel, who's the pelvic floor physiotherapist, earlier today. And she's like, when we open up our throat, our glottis, it also opens up the pelvic floor and the
Yeah.
cervix. And so
Which we
these
learned in our hypnobirthing
vocalizations,
class. Yeah.
there you go. There you go. And so these vocalizations are not just, a part of the process or a side effect of the process. Like it's an integral aspect of opening up the birth canal so that Ivy could make her way out.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Way
Yeah.
better than like keeping your mouth closed and like trying to hold that in, which I'm sure so many
Yeah.
people do, right? Because people are like afraid of, I don't know what the word is, like, I don't know, being embarrassed or
Judgment.
being judged.
Yeah.
And I think like, man, in that moment, like you have to throw that out the window. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's just everything is like whatever. It's all out there. You know what I mean? You make any sound you need to make, you move in any way you need to move, and you just got to let it go. Make like Elsa and let it go.
That's right. That's where the magic happens, right?
Exactly.
Totally.
She knows.
She knows, man. She's a princess or a
Yes.
queen.
Queen.
Yes, queen.
Yeah. So I'd like to talk about how your experiences impacted the postpartum period.
Sure. Man, I don't know if so much of the difference came in the actual birth itself, or if it's a big difference in having, your first child versus your second, or it's a little bit of a combination of both. But I will say that after having Emily, I didn't get that rush of oxytocin, like that feel good sort of cocktail that you get after having your baby. I had none of that. So firstly, I started off on this guilty foot. I just found, it's so hard to sort of move, and you're sort of still hooked up to all this stuff in the hospital. And with Emily, like I had huge issues, like just starting off the bat, like with getting her to latch. She was like a very like fussy baby in terms of like feeding her. So right off the bat, they had sort of suggested giving her formula in the hospital, which I knew you weren't supposed to do, because I knew offering them a bottle like right away can affect that whole thing, but it had been sort of like a whole day and she really wasn't like latching. And I thought, well, I want you to have food and I don't want you to die on me. So, okay. So another sort of intervention, and they gave her a bottle in the hospital, which we sort of then continued to do a little bit at home while I sort of tried to breastfeed her. But she just was so fussy. Like she just would flip out and
death screams.
yeah, it was crazy. Like she just didn't want to do it. So with Emily, I not only am I feeling guilty, I'm struggling with trying to feed her, which I completely didn't expect. I ended up pumping exclusively for the year because I went to see like lactation consultants and it just, you know, in the moment that I'd be standing in front of them, they could get it to work. And the second I'd leave the room, it was like over again. And I was like, I don't understand. Like, how come I can't get her to do this? Anyways, whatever. But also, it was like this huge major shift. People always tell you, you know, you get married, it really changes your life. And I'm like, no, getting married doesn't change your life. What changes your life is having a baby. Like it flips your world up, like, as I'm sure you know, it flips your world upside down. Like your life is like now no longer yours. It's like somebody else's. And I think that I probably had maybe a little, I don't know if it was just the baby blues that I had, or if it was a little bit of like mild postpartum depression that I had going on at the time. But I now know that it's like completely normal to be crying all the time within those first couple of weeks. I was just feeling like I've made a horrible, awful mistake. Like I loved my daughter so much. Like, don't be mistaken on that front. I didn't want to like give her back or anything, but it was like, I've made a terrible, awful mistake. Like I can't go out with my friends. My body feels just awful. Like my postpartum recovery was rough. Like it was so hard to get, like I slept downstairs for like 2 weeks on my couch because I couldn't climb my stairs up to my bedroom after having the C-section. So it was like, it was just very hard physically recovery wise. And it also made it hard for me to be able to hold her and try to feed her because just like sort of the pain of having surgery. So I will say that it was rough. It was like a first time baby was rough, and having come out of surgery and having to now deal with this new baby was also really rough. So with Ivy, it was the first like 24 hours, I will say, like I was like, oh my gosh, everything was amazing. Like you should definitely do this. And like it was great. Like was an easy latcher. I don't know if it had to do with like me having come out of having a C-section versus not. I don't know like how that affected her versus how it would have affected Emily, or, you know, the fact that I wasn't able to hold Emily on my chest for that sort of first hour afterward. I'll never really know if that had a huge effect on that sort of journey, but she's been a great latcher. My doula was also, she is like a La Leche League leader. So she actually hosts like all these sort of breastfeeding sort of classes and things in the Newmarket area. So she came after the fact, like after she was born, for those visits, and she really helped me like to make sure that things were going well in that department. And so I think having that initial support, like not only because she was there right after she was born, so she could help me with that right away. She was way better than the hospital staff at being able to help me with that, but also just coming to my house a couple days later. How's it going? Here are some things you can try now that you're in your own home. You know, lactation consultant in their office doesn't come to your house, you know, in your environment to help you with that. So on that front, it was way easier. What I will say is after that 24 hours, like recovery from like a natural birth is no joke either. You know what I mean? I thought I was like out of the woods. Like I thought, oh my gosh, this is great. No pain, no problem. But it definitely comes with its own set of uncomfortable things, which we don't have to dive into. If you've given birth, if you know, you know, you know. But you know, but it goes much quicker. Like I'll say about a week after, like I was doing way, way, way better. I was out, we got home on Halloween night with Ivy. It was a half an hour before trick-or-treating started. And my sister was over at my house with her daughter and her husband, and they were taking the girls out trick-or-treating. But like the difference between me not being able to climb my stairs for 2 weeks with my first daughter, I took Emily out to 5 houses around our cul-de-sac for Halloween. I did a little walk around the neighborhood. And I went upstairs and I slept in my own bed that first night. Now, was it a
Mm.
chaos of a night with
Yes.
having it be Halloween, a sugar high of candy, my daughter's jumping on our bed and I'm trying to latch this baby and I'm just crying my eyeballs out. It's like chaos. But it was night and day, like physically and recovery wise, like just to be out walking in my neighborhood as opposed to
Totally.
like just on my couch, like immobile, basically. Like it was
Mhm.
a
Yeah.
huge, it's been a huge difference in every way, really.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
Like
right
it's
after she was born, the nurse, it was like, do you want a wheelchair to go to your recovery? Because you were in a different room than delivery. So you go to the recovery room. She's like, do you want to walk or do you want a wheelchair? And I was like, well, we'll see what I feel like when I stand up. And I stood up and she was like, I was like, yeah, I'll walk. And so we go by the nursing station. She's like, look, my patient's walking. And she like displays me as I'm walking by. So, you know, just huge difference overall.
Yeah, those are major, major differences. And you're right. Like it still takes time to recover after a vaginal
Oh,
birth.
yeah, it's no joke.
There's still discomforts. You still had to get stitches, right?
Yep.
And so there's still the healing from that.
Yeah.
But the fact that you were mobile, the fact that you had all of that hormonal cascade, that hormonal cocktail, so that you could bond with Ivy in a different way, and that you could hold her on your
Yeah.
chest, and that
Oh,
she
yeah.
could latch. Having the doula, having someone who is experienced with breastfeeding and nursing is important. Like for me, the midwives were invaluable in helping me in that process, and it sounds like the doula played that role for you.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
someone to come to your house, because you had an experience that with Emily, you were doing pumping, right?
Yeah.
So someone to come to your house and kind of tweak things a little bit and show you and give you some tips, like that really makes a huge difference. So for
Huge
anyone
difference.
listening, like you can pre-book a lactation consultant or someone who will come to your house, or that even just to come and check on you and be like, yep, everything's going well, or you can tweak this. Like it makes a huge difference if breastfeeding is something that you choose to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Like
Yeah.
wild difference. And I know that there are also groups like in the community that you can go to as well, like the ones that my doula leads. And those are supposed to be really helpful as well. So I would definitely say, like, if you're struggling in that department, then yeah, having someone like that on your team is hugely beneficial.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like you guys had both very intense experiences.
But
And you approach them both very differently. And it's not like you didn't do some things for your first experience. Like you still went into it, like you learned about hypnobirthing and you were prepared, but it sounds like you dove so much deeper for
Oh, yeah.
your
yeah,
second experience.
we
And
did.
Yeah.
yeah, and connected to yourself in a deeper level. Like when even just going to the gym, like you're connecting to your body in a different way, right? Like you're experiencing the thresholds of discomfort and moving through those and knowing that it's making you stronger, which probably benefited you in that experience as well.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember you at the baby moon retreat because we did the cold immersion in
Oh
that
yes.
pond.
Yeah.
And I remember you just like surrendering to the discomfort and, it's okay. And all of those experiences, like moving and
Both
learning that it's
times.
okay.
Because even at
Oh, yeah.
your women's retreat, I got into, and I was like new, like super fresh pregnant then.
That's
So
true.
yeah,
That's true. So true. So Ivy is a cold plunger.
she is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't
She's
know
an
if I'm a cold
experience.
plunger, but Ivy's a cold plunger.
Yes, she's an experienced cold plunger. So there is this sense of surrendering to discomfort that I'm hearing, and like the experiences that you went throughout your pregnancy that likely served you in the birth experience. And yeah, I just want to kind of like pat you both on the back. Not that you need it. You guys know that you rock this, but like you guys just really took charge, and you also, I think, did something that was unexpected. Like it's very much so expected from the stories I hear as well. When someone has a cesarean birth, second time around, it's a scheduled cesarean birth. And so you guys did something that was sort of like against the norm, and you just went into it and you're like, okay, it might not be what's recommended from my OB, but I'm just going to empower myself and get the resources and the support that I want, and I'm going to have, or at least go for the experience that I want.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
I just felt like I really didn't want to have another C-section. I just did not enjoy the recovery of it. And I just thought, you know what, I'm finally over that experience of recovering from that. Like I don't have all these weird feelings on my scar whenever I wear clothes and stuff. There's all these things you don't think about. I'm like, man, I just really don't want to do that again. And I also just really wanted for myself to have that other experience that I had tried so hard for the first time but didn't have. And so,
Yeah. And witnessing the birth and seeing Ivy come out and picking her up and putting it on her, and how like it was fitting into our plan, and the joy that Melissa had holding her, and I was like over the moon, like super happy, and to be in this moment, like it was sublime.
Sublime.
I love that description. Yeah. I can see it in your faces. Like what a euphoric, like transformative moment it must have been for both of you guys.
Yeah. It was just, it was like just this really feeling of success. You know what I mean? Like, like I did it. I did the thing that I knew I could do. So it just felt really good.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what I like to ask everyone on the podcast before we end off is, because the idea of imprinting is, I think, so profound in the birth experience. So like as soon as baby comes out, there's this profound imprint. The environment makes a difference. The state of the parents make a difference. And so we can imprint love and safety and trust onto the next generation, or something else. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's anxiety. Sometimes it's uncertainty. Sometimes it's mistrust, right? So, and that's not permanent. We can always do work to shift that. But it is such a beautiful thing when we start off a life with that imprint of just, this is where I'm meant to be. It's safe. I have loving support around me. So what would you like to imprint onto the listeners, who some of them might be pregnant, getting ready for birth? This podcast is also for the entrepreneurs, especially female entrepreneurs who are ready to birth something beautiful into this world, whether it's a business or a creative endeavor, and also what we collectively as humanity are birthing for the future. What would you like to imprint on the listeners?
I would say trust and like fearlessness, like trusting in yourself and trusting in the process, and trying not to be afraid. Like even starting a business and things, like it's scary because you don't know if it's going to work or not. You know what I mean? Like there's, yeah. And joy, like always aim for joy.
Yeah.
Positivity. Like be positive.
Like, I
always wonder how I'm so positive. I'm like, I don't know. Just smile.
I always say you can't base a decision off of FUD, so that fear, uncertainty, and doubt. A lot of people might like not start a business or not wanting to have kids, but if your decision is made based off of this fear, uncertainty, and doubt, then that should actually be like a red flag, and you take action and you push through those things, and you're going to see like the grass is greener, right? Like
yeah, I've heard like anytime you make a decision out of fear, then that whole endeavor or that whole decision is shrouded in fear, instead of making a decision based off of this ability, this deep trust that you know that you want to do something, and you trust that you can do it, that you are capable, or at least you're getting the resources and support so that you can be capable in that endeavor. Then it's such like, it could be the same goal, right? But it's like the results often can be so different depending on whatever your goal is. Yeah. Whether it's a birth or a business or whatever it might be. Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing your story. You guys have both been like so vulnerable and so authentic and given us many, many details. And it's just so beautiful to see the difference that like deep trust can make, the difference that finding the right resources and support can make, and that you fulfilled your desire, that you knew you wanted to do this and you did it, and the satisfaction that I see on both of your faces that brought. So it's amazing, and I hope that it inspires our listeners.
So do I. Thank you for having us on.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Love you guys.
Love you too.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I'm so grateful that you're here, and I really can't wait for this community to just flourish and blossom. Please remember to like and share this podcast and leave a review if you feel called to. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Upstream Institute for more information on offerings and retreats. I'll see you next time.